My name's Holly Baker-Bolgerback. I'm a clinical counsellor in Braidwood, New South Wales. I work mostly with anxiety and trauma, and I see people locally as well online nationally. People's mental health is affected by the fires. I think primarily that feeling of threat and unsurety, like something's out of control, something that you can't control yourself, and that sense of whether or not it's going to be okay. And that's not something that we're mostly familiar with. Like, most people live their life in a pretty decent routine. They know what they can expect from one day to the next. So when something like the fires surround you or show up, there's that element of like it increases the anxiety and the fear in a way that everyday life doesn't. Yeah. Trauma is what we talk about when we say that our resources have been overwhelmed by the situation at hand. And that can happen to someone on day one, and that can happen to someone 6 months down the track. So when we're thinking about these kind of disasters, we need to be supporting people long term, because what we saw in terms of the fires around us was we all got through the fires, and then we had the COVID, and we had a flood in there, and then we had another flood. And so we're looking at, in terms of trauma, we're looking at overwhelmed people. That needs to be thought of more than just the one disaster that happens, and how do we ongoingly support communities so that there's always more to fill their cup. In a future catastrophe, what could be done better is to resource the mental health practitioners that are already on the ground, making sure that there's funding there that they can access immediately, to be particularly for private practitioners that are already working a full-time sort of caseload. But things change in those instances of disaster, and we need to have funding so that those same therapists can be on the ground working with the people that are most affected, which are not necessarily their regular caseload people, and giving them as much support so that they can still do what they do really well and actually assist their community, because everyone wants to assist, but if everybody steps forward in a volunteer capacity, because there's no finances, that's what they're going to do, we're going to see burnout in our local practitioners, and that's obviously not what we want on a long-term scale.
At the moment, since the fires and COVID, there's a very large amount of anxiety and trauma around in our community, and Holly and other people like Holly work very well with the nervous system and ways to actually pick up what's happening quickly through the breath and through movement, to actually ease that so that there's enough space to look at the stress that's happening and have an opportunity to face it and work through it.
Having someone like Holly, who's a clinical counsellor who lives in the community, who's part of the community, who knows what's going on in the community, is a real boon. Like, it's an extremely valuable thing that we have here.
In this community, I think I learned as a therapist the importance of people coming together for their mental health during the time of the fires, like that feeling of having some sense of control as they worked together. But then once the immediate threat disappeared, people went back to their everyday lives, and that separation was kind of impacted things on a longer term. So when we're together, we feel good, we feel connected, we feel safe together, but then life goes back to normal, we spread out, the other stresses of life come together. When there's an imminent threat like a fire, we're not focusing on any of the other stresses, but then life goes back into your regular everyday, and suddenly you're thinking about, I've got to make the money this week, or I've got to get the kids to school, all these everyday stresses which kind of separate people within a community back into their little boxes in their little houses. And long term, what that looks like is we just kind of forget to look after the things that were important to look after at the time when the fires were happening.